In this video I just want to discuss some developments in Australia since the 1990s and what the government has done to ensure that we've boosted our productive capacity since the early 1990s, because this was a period of struggle and economic downturn and recession for the Australian economy. You'll often hear the government talking about how we've now had 26 years of growth and prosperity, and that all flows from the fact that we had a recession back in the start of the 1990s. So we're looking at aggregate supply side policies in particular that have been implemented over the last 25 years. So for starters, the 90s was a really bad time. 1990, 1991 was a period when we were in a recession and growth was really slow. So here are some things that was causing poor performance in Australia in the early 1990s. So when I say we had poor performance, we had an unemployment rate of 11% and participation rates were only at 62%. So a lot of people weren't in the workforce. We had really high unemployment, so it was hard to get a job, and yet we still had inflation of over 6%. So despite the higher level of unemployment and how difficult it was to get a job, we still had really high prices. And that boiled down to a whole range of things. One of the main reasons that we were having a period of what we call stagflation is that during this period, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and that led to significantly higher oil prices. So firms were experiencing really high costs of production. That was limiting their ability to supply. It was reducing their demand because there was high prices and causing both inflation and high levels of unemployment in the economy. Other things that were happening, we had a lot of really inefficient businesses. So as you'll know today, a lot of these government business enterprises have been privatised. So things like Telstra and Qantas, rather than being very competitive industries, they were run as monopolies by the government. So there was no competition in the telecommunications industry. There was very little competition in the domestic airline industry. And the problem with that is it leads to inefficiencies. It leads to businesses not working as productively as they possibly can because there's a lack of competition. So there's less pressure to keep prices down. We had really high barriers to trade. So there were large tariffs on things like textiles and cars. So that again led to less efficiency within our businesses because we didn't need to be as efficient because there wasn't as much competition. Because the government was in charge of setting wages, there was a high number of industrial disputes. So there was a lot of strikes going on where workers within particular industries would fight with the government to improve their pay and conditions. There was poor labour market flexibility, so we had really high minimum wages. There wasn't a lot of scope for sort of flexibility within the labour market. People were getting really high penalty rates on the weekends, so that was costing businesses a lot of money. The high minimum wage compared to other countries was making it really hard for businesses to be profitable. There was a lot of people on welfare, and our welfare system was too generous, so it wasn't providing the incentive for people to work hard and get back into the workforce, and that all led to really poor rates of productivity. It also, because of the poor rates of productivity, we had high prices, and that was leading to a high current account deficit. It was hurting our exchange rate and causing high levels of net foreign debt. So the economy was really struggling in the early 1990s. We were in danger of becoming what is called a banana republic, which is basically an industry that basically relies on one sort of key commodity to service its whole economy and is very unproductive in other areas. So Australia's goal after 1990 was to start to increase competition. Let's increase competition so we become more productive. Let's boost the nation's productive capacity so that we can produce more without causing inflation and provide increased employment. Enable firms to reduce prices by doing things like reforming the labour market and reducing minimum wages, and try and increase real GDP without causing inflationary pressures so that we can boost living standards as much as possible. So what did we do? This is what basically some of the six key things the Australian government has done in the last 25 years to become more productive, to boost our productive capacity, and to lower costs of production for firms. So the first thing is trade liberalisation, and we'll learn about that more in the next chapter, but it's basically about removing barriers to trade so that we specialise in areas of comparative advantage and there's more competition, so that boosts productivity. Lots of taxation reforms. So I'll show you on the next slide. One of these taxation reforms is the government reduced income and company taxes to try and get people to join the workforce. So lower company taxes, as you know, promotes investment spending. Lower income taxes promote participation and productivity. So what they did is, you can see this is the old tax structure with income taxes. You can see once you start earning over $4,500, you start paying 30 cents, and the top tax bracket is nearly 60 cents. Now, obviously, these income ranges aren't that important because it has a lot of inflation since then, but the actual tax brackets are a lot higher, which showing there was a really heavy tax burden on consumers compared to what they are now. So what the government did is they basically decided to reduce income and company taxes and put the taxes on other things like GST. Because the thing is, if we put the tax on GST, yes, it will slow down spending and increase prices, but it won't have the negative implications for participation and productivity and things like that. So we had taxation reforms where we lowered income and company taxes, trade liberalisation. We increased money on education and training and infrastructure to provide for a more productive workforce and to reduce production costs because we're more efficient, we're spending less time in traffic, which will boost our productive capacity. They changed unemployment benefits, so they made it harder for people to get welfare, so people had to be involved in a program called Work for the Dole, which was all about trying to improve skills and making them more employable and boosting our long-term productive capacity. We deregulated a lot of markets, so rather than being government-owned, we privatised things like Telstra and the banking sector to try and make them more competitive and more efficient and lower prices. And we also implemented a range of labour market reforms. So rather than the government setting wages, we started to link wages to productivity with the idea that if people get paid based on how productive they are and the profits that they generate, that can help to boost wages and help to boost productivity and boost our international competitiveness. So rather than the government setting wages, the workplaces were allowed to set their own paying conditions of their individual workplace. Again, designed to boost productivity and make people work harder. So they were the key reforms that happened in the 90s and 2000s to try and make us more efficient.